Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention, please. I'm using what is left of the official Yeatman gavel, which is running away. The one I was using downstairs for the board meeting earlier was a great deal more fun to wield, but it gets the job done. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope we will make it worth your walk. I'm Bill Piper. I am the president of the advisory board of the St. Louis Mercantile Library Association. And, this is, are we at the end of our 175th year now, John? Or the observance of the 175th?
We just begun today our 176.
Very good. Always ask the source. And I don't really have any profound remarks. I will possibly steal a line or two from either Dean Daines or John Hoover. And just remind you that the pyramid out above our lovely space, giving us great light, does not leak, or at least supposedly does not. It's been fixed in any event. So we look forward to having that not be an issue for quite some time, because it certainly was one for quite some time. In any event, I get a mixture of kind of sad duties and pleasant ones as part of this meeting. We have 4 members of the board who are cycling off, and I don't see any of them here. Ron Els was here for the board meeting earlier. You're probably more familiar with him and his persona as Johnny Rabbit. And then Dan Martin, the drawer of the Weatherbird, and Carrie Polk and Phil Stubb. Their terms have expired. I hope they'll continue to be active. I'm mighty sure they will be, but still, just a manner of just expressing appreciation for all that everyone does. I am pleased to state also that renominated for second terms in a group whose term will expire in the year 2025 are Spencer Burke, our secretary, Charlie Hemans, our board membership chairman, David Jump, and Dr. Tom Ray. Tom was present by Zoom earlier. I don't see him, but in any event. And then also nominated for a first term, our directors, as you probably know, can serve 2 consecutive terms. Again, for a term to expire in 2025, Mr. Sumner Honeywell, Christy James, Barry Langenberg, and Jim Shealy. Jim in particular has been a great support for a long, long time. So is there a nomination to accept the people nominated for the class of 2025?
So moved.
Judge Grady, second. Mr. Brown. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you kindly. And now it is time for the director's report.
Thanks, Bill. Everyone, be sure to sign the register back there. Be part of history. When we have that out, it's always special to look at the names over the years. Again, thanks, Mr. President and Chancellor Sobolik and Dean Daines. And thank you all as members and friends of this library for attending. On one of those beautiful evenings in St. Louis, when winter's giving up the ghost earlier than usual, Valentine's Day dinner was held in 1964. It was a very special night for the city, 200 years old that night, in fact, and marking the traditional day when the trading post was established by Laclede and his stepson on the forested riverbanks that would grow into such a storied metropolis of great companies, institutions, and crucial events. Former President Truman attended the dinner. Many local dignities were there. And best and perhaps most significant of all, the gala dinner occurred at the Mercantile Library for the city's greatest birthday party, a special time of revitalization for downtown and reassessment of ongoing plans for the city itself. So the first library of St. Louis, its grand old reading room, that was the natural and logical host for such an important event. That may be one of the most important recognitions up to its time of how the Mercantile and St. Louis have always been linked in history. There was an exhibition of the rare books and art that told St. Louis's story. Our fabulous Chateau manuscript on the founding of the city took center stage, and I wish I could have viewed the throng from above in the grailwork mezzanine, like I did so many times as a young curator during events, keeping a proudly watchful eye on a rousing, unfolding evening in the same great room that hosted this 1964 crowd. We've just finished our most eventful anniversary year that echoed the 1964 dinner celebration. Our theme was a nation, a city, and a library. And we feel we have adequately restated that link for future members and staff and for the community who use and are interested in the health and thriving of the city's cultural institutions. Through the affiliation with the University of Missouri System and especially St. Louis, at no better time than the present is our institution linked to the future of St. Louis through the education of UMSL students, our main mission, our primary reason to exist, among our many other useful and praiseworthy and logical cultural goals and aspirations. Because of this encouraging mission, the Mercantile's collections grow, membership builds, awareness and pride in this institution follows. That mirrors the pride the Mercantile has always had to put St. Louis in its name, one of the longest lasting calling cards of a local cultural institution on the national stage. Always nationally recognized in the library and art world, this St. Louis Mercantile Library Association. Membership and programs have been linked hand in hand here this year. As the world around us reawakens from a long 2-year slumber, it is a great source of pride that the Mercantile Library kept open nearly the entire period of the pandemic. Staff returned to work carefully to split teams to achieve this safely, and while our library was challenged like every other cultural institution certainly, it has been an excellent feature of service here that our programs, events, and publications could be effectively shared online and in person, on paper, and digitally. The results have been astounding. 4 monographs have been published in the anniversary era by our staff. Most recently, the 2nd edition of the Guide to the Library's Art Collection, praised from coast to coast by museums and galleries. A great testament to the author, Julie Dunn-Morton, and Nick Fry's History of American Railroads, published in collaboration with the internationally focused Collier Club of New York, will be available this month. It marks 40 years of comprehensive collecting of rail history by the Mercantile. Outreach through newspaper stories, magazine articles, and media interviews continue to increase in this busy year, attracting strong attention to our programs. The Mercantile created curatorial hybrid webinars, which attracted new patrons and new understanding about just how deep this collection is in scrapbooks, ephemera, drawings, and sketches and photographs related to all eras of American history. The staff has continued to build its K-12 anniversary program by linking students of all ages with the historical and cultural stories of its collection. These present the tale of St. Louis above all else. The library has moved ahead with new exhibitions you can see today on favorite portraiture in the art collection to pictorial maps and to new acquisitions, and will in weeks to come offer a new exhibition on artist sketches and drawings in the collection, Pencils on the Frontier. The third exhibition we have offered to Lambert International Airport is on display until the fall. When the library does something like that, it's not a poster show, it's the real thing. Original textiles, art, rare books, and to give a feeling to travelers of what it meant to venture out from St. Louis on the many trails our founders blazed. The collections coming this year were magnificent. To me, I feel the most lasting result of the past year, virtually in the wake of the great anniversary we celebrated, was collection growth. Booksellers nationwide awoke to our publicity and anniversary publications alike as carefully planned and have offered new building blocks, new foundational acquisitions to tell the story of the great and humble alike who built this city and this nation. Vernacular scrapbooks and photographic resources have come to the River Collection. Manuscripts documenting the sacrifices of African Americans who worked as slaves to help build the rails and this city have been added. Extremely scarce city directories, only known copies, in fact, from early Kansas City to Denver to San Francisco have been offered and acquired, many as gifts to honor our milestone 175th anniversary. The art collection has grown with a major frontier archive of drawings. A key Robert Fulton letter claiming his predominant role in steamboat technology was added with generous financial support from one of your member friends and colleagues. The Edward Curtis North American Indian photo collection was enhanced with over 50 of the finest versions the great photographer produced of Plains tribal peoples and landscapes, including one of his greatest images, the Duck Hunter. 2 extraordinary bronzes by Frederick Remington. His scarce series of portrait busts were added this year. Paintings by the finest local artists, prints and engravings by coveted early American illustrators, rare newspaper broadsides, early Mexican maps, the first novel on the American West by a Spanish sojourner, the key Mexican notice to the citizens of that country to take up arms in 1846 against US federal troops, which were then moving into disputed Texas, playing directly into the hands of manifest destiny plans of President Polk in the beginning of the Mexican War. This was indeed one of the Mercantile's greatest collecting years for our readers and students, our primary mission. Conservation of existing collections has gone hand in hand, and we will be creating new protective boxes and bindings for fragile rare books constantly in use. The John B. Meacham autobiographical letter that John Mason Peck gave the founders of the Mercantile will be meticulously restored. And with it, a key story of African-American history for this city will be preserved. Donors, thank you. I offer my deepest appreciation for the generosity of our donors who made this year's annual campaign and capital improvement campaign inspiring. Leadership gifts include Stan Frierks, the Herman T. and Feeding Our Pot Foundation, the Way Trust, the Pershing Charitable Foundation, the Edward Young Trust, St. Clair Seaford and the descendants of William Lane Scott, Union Pacific, the Candelaria Fund, Northern Trust, David Kemper, William Piper, Paul Brower, Jane Gleason, Carol Gruen, Bob and Mary Ellen Dick, Bruce and Barbara Feldacher, Graham Rader, Michael Heaston, Tom and Deb Ray, Ruth Bowen, the Harry Matthews Foundation, the Waterways Journal, James Shealy, Christy James, Spencer and Phoebe Burke, the Haverty Family Foundation, the St. Louis Trust Company, Dave Jump, Ann Linners, Jackie Vossler, Harry Langenberg, Robert Morrissey, Brad Layton, Nancy and Kenneth Kransberg, Brian Easley, Philip Laughlin, and many other generous donations of all sizes, whatever the amount, are so welcome and were. They registered the strong support of our entire board and an engaged and active membership throughout St. Louis and the nation. The membership of the Mercantile since the pandemic has grown by 140%, for which we are enormously grateful. Every year in the last decade has, thanks to you, surpassed its fundraising goals, and the library now raises $3 for every dollar of allocated support from the University of Missouri St. Louis. That has allowed collections and programs to grow and thrive on this campus for the students and researchers we welcome. And of course, we are grateful to the university for its vision and assistance. This year, the university's Mercantile Library professorship returned to the library itself and was bestowed on Julie Dunn-Morton. In a short 2-month construction project, the iconic atrium pyramid was restored by the university, which we will formally reopen this afternoon. Problem leaks and windows are scheduled for repair, and the university is matching every dollar we raise together, you and I, with commensurate funds for the capital campaign for library renovation and transformation. In summation, the library is thriving through its many avenues of support. I want to thank the staff with heartfelt gratitude for making the past year so rewarding an experience for me, and more importantly, for the community. Julie Dunn-Morton has advised, planned, and worked creatively on every front, which brings the Mercantile the credit it enjoys. She is as much a treasure to this institution as any one of the great artworks she has preserved or added here. Brittany West is everyone's right hand at the library, and her creativity, problem solving, and outreach to our members is crucial to our progress. Charles Brown, even in semi-retirement, has worked tirelessly to train and pass on his knowledge to a new generation of staff here. Alyssa Person has become, through her promise and hard work, our first curator of access and discovery. Sarah Hodges' dedication and perseverance is helping the library grow rapidly. Nick Fry's knowledge, collegiality, service, and optimism is a glue that binds this fine staff ensemble. Adrian Reif, as the William Lane Scott curator, has in the short span of one spring taken on great responsibilities in our collection support and is able already to point successfully to significant milestones in realizing our long-held dream of creating the St. Louis Globe Democrat online for all St. Louisans to read its magisterial pages on our shared history. To them and to our energetic student assistants, our dedicated volunteers, our talented and knowledgeable docents, our fine development and advancement coordinator, Karen Fenoglio, and administratively to Chancellor Sobolik, Dean Daines, Associate Dean Pazalian, and Executive Assistant Liz Richter, go my sincere thanks always. So the library in April moved from a great 175th anniversary year indeed, quickly and decisively, proudly, actively, and vibrantly into its 176th year of service to this community and beyond. The year ahead is filled with plans for the future, collections to secure, projects to complete, programs to offer, exhibitions to present. It will be a year in which long-held dreams are realized with new spaces, galleries, study areas, and entryways built to focus on a collection that moves forward into the hearts and imagination of the next generation of users, readers, and students. The past here is what the Mercantile cherishes, but the future is what we treasure. How we get there will make all the difference to our history. The people celebrating the founding of St. Louis in the fine old reading room of the Mercantile 6 decades ago, on that fine night in 1964, must have on some level knew the same. St. Louis will be great and lasting as long as its cultural institutions are cherished for past achievement and future need of them. The grandparent of all of them, the Mercantile, continues to do that as much or more than any because of its special history, heritage, and because of you. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, John. And now a report on the renovations from Dean Chris Davis of the library.
Thank you, Bill. I'm honored to report to you that in just one short year since we began an all-encompassing campaign to renovate, restore, and revitalize the spaces and systems of the University Library Building, a $9 million project spanning the main level of the building, the main level of the Mercantile Library, and the fifth floor of our complex. The quiet phase has proceeded well. Much money has been raised from private donors, businesses, and corporations. Federal assistance has been approved, and we are already in the second phase of planning this summer and fall, and are projecting construction to begin on a transformative and enhanced center for students, a new computer center for online access, a new cafe, an outdoor plaza, and restored entryways. New galleries on the same floor for the Mercantile collections, a better linked entrance to the treasures and holdings of the Mercantile, a new dedicated art museum gallery in the Mercantile itself, in addition to its familiar secondary galleries, study rooms, and better office space for my administrative team and the circulation, reference, and technical services staff of the Thomas Jefferson collections. September 2023 is the target for the work to begin. As John has mentioned, the membership of the Mercantile has been unflinching in its assistance for this great once-in-a-generation renovation, and we're grateful to gifts great and small. They constitute leadership and vision on all levels. I'm also tremendously grateful to John and his key staff in one of their busiest years for tireless development, funding work, and to a fine advancement team benefiting not only from John's experience, but also include the excellent assistance of Sharon Panoglio and Chancellor Soblik's enthusiastic and crucial input. We began our project early during the pandemic lockdown in the way with a $1 million shelving project in the University Library ground floor, compact shelving style. This year, the university has also restored the pyramid skylight over the Mercantile atrium. Both these capital projects were timely and dovetail perfectly with the interior public space restoration for students, researchers, and for your events. When the project is finished, a stage will be set for further collection needs and enhancement. There is always more to do. It'll never end.
Yeah.
Securing this extraordinary collection from leaks and buildings settling, more compact shelving to make space for special collections, programs, events, and the public, better lighting and further security enhancements. In the meantime, this first phase of work will link the entire North Campus together to the library footprint, truly decentralizing the campus and the library, its core service to transformative learning. I am grateful for your enthusiasm and welcome support.
Thank you, D. James. Now we come to the presentation by Mr. John Hoover and Dr. Julie Dunn-Morton. Take it away, please.
I'm going to be speaking about folios and quartos and octavos and sort of that kind of language. And I learned long ago once when a museum studies student once raised her hand after I started to talk about the different lined Bibles of the 15th century, that she said, "Would you please speak English?" You know, and so I just thought maybe I should kind of review. So some of you know this, so please forgive this, but this is about the standard piece of paper that's been published, that's been used since really the 15th century and even before. And so when it's folded once, and you would print four pages, four leaves really from that. So that becomes a folio book. And sometimes larger ones like the Audubon is a double elephant folio or an imperial folio. But this is a little bit large, but this is close to what the paper might have looked like in the city-states in Italy or how it was produced. If you fold it again, then you start to to get down to the sizes that are called quarto books. And they have a range of sizes. It's not clad in stone, these terms. But they're very important in turn, but you would have, then you'd have 8, you'd have 4, you'd have 4 8 leaves. And then you would, if a person wanted to do a smaller book, like an octavo book, that's where you would get 16 leaves on both sides, you know. So, and then, of course, probably many of you noticed books, older books, where the edges are untrimmed. Well, that's because of the cutting open of the books later on. I remember as a student at the math library up in Northwestern, that was my weekly task, because many books still came from Europe that were unopened. And so I'd have to get a letter out and probably wreck some mathematician's career by cutting the page wrong. And then so anyway, but then again, it just happens. But anyway, but that gives, and then you can fold it again, and you've got duodecimal, and so they start to go up 16-mo. But the size is important, because you can see as these handmade books were done, that if say you always hear about the first folio of Shakespeare. Well, many times that was done individually, and if a leaf had not made it into the binding or something had been removed, that becomes the evidence of descriptive bibliography, and where meaning changes in terms of the meaning of Hamlet or something. So the idea of the sizes, as well as the typography and the way these books are set up, do mean something. In terms of what I've got here today, I've got a folio book, a folio book, a folio book, and a folio book. And then these are plates from those books. And that gives you the idea of what I'm really wanting to bring out. These would be called either octavos, or in the case of James Otto Lewis, a quarto book. And so it's so interesting that all of this around 200 years ago had an impact in early America, and early American books followed this plan. And often the folio books for wealthy people, and the smaller books would be for popular reading, or people who could afford the book. Now it doesn't seem like that now, because many of these books cost many thousands of dollars, but back then it certainly was the difference between a fancy library and somebody just reading. So I just wanted to bring that up. And this all started a while back at one of our print fairs that many of you come to. And what this was bought by me at from the Philadelphia print shop, and some of you know the proprietors there. But I looked at the description. I thought, well, this is the folio plate of James Otto Lewis that's been severely cut down, because his book is so rare that it's very little known and very mysterious that he actually had the resolve and the determination to print a quarto edition, a smaller edition of his great book, The Aboriginal Portfolio, at the time that this book was failing. When I first came to the library and I handled all of these books for the first time, I thought, well, this is extraordinary. And then I saw this one book on the old steps, in the old cases that we had in the reading room downtown. And I thought, my goodness, they've got an Aboriginal portfolio here at the Mercantile. It was such a great period of discovery for me to think that nobody has this book. You know, there are 3 versions of it: a 64 plate, a 72 plate, and an 80 plate. We have like almost the unheard of 72 plate version. And but I'm not stopping there. I'm still looking for the 80 plate. You know, every once in a while, you know, I get an offer, but it doesn't quite turn out to be. But this got me starting very excited to think there might be a chance to be able to acquire a quarto edition of Lewis's great book on Native Americans. And so we did acquire it at the Reese sale. So we're going to look at it and we acquired portions of it. That's another story. And we're going to look at that with Julie's help in a few moments. But I wanted to start out, Brittany, do we have the plates here? There we go. There we go. And you know, you'll decide later on if this was failure or triumph or both. I think it is. So, but anyway, let's go on to the next slide, of course. This is, it really is a story of these Native American galleries. And of course, this is one of the greatest prints, plates, images ever done on the American West, the Medicine Man Parishka Group and the man down that Carl Baumer did for Prince Maximilian. That book, and then next, that book was simultaneous with George Catlin's work on the really almost following the same thing. The North American Indian was his great work. You can, the frontispiece for the small text is actually showing him painting one of the great chiefs. This is Petalasharu, and this chieftain came to Philadelphia and to Washington and was painted by Charles Byrd King. And for the history of the Indian tribes of North America by Thomas McKinney. And so these are some, this is what I've kind of put together in how the books were presented, large and small, large and small. Next page. And then, and to give you an idea, Baumer didn't really have ever a smaller edition, but his plates were so beloved in America and in Europe that they were reduced in engravings. And this is Graham's magazine, a ladies' magazine for fashion of the time in the 1840s. So he had his own sort of, this book had its own life and many reproductions, just not necessarily by the publisher. The publisher was a nobleman and he didn't really need the popularly priced edition. He did the great set as really a band to science. Next plate. And then a McKinney and Hall's plate set, which is really part of the story of James Otto Lewis's set, is represented by these. We have both the small and the large folio set of the Indian tribes. So this is what we're really, this is the holy grail of all of these great Indian gallery books. It's the Aboriginal portfolio. It came out in parts, like a lot of these books did, and so this is part one, and this is a typical image. That's a Keokuk in the book. So I just wanted to lead up to that, and these plates were taken from the book here. So Lewis. One of the things that I love about his story is that he was, can I call him a St. Louis painter? Julie,
Passed through.
Passed through, okay. And he passed through life in that way. He was born in 1799 in Philadelphia and studied as a young apprentice engravings and printmaking, and that would be one of the early centers here. They weren't as good as the British, but he certainly had good teachers. But so he picked up that. But then by the time he was a teenager, he had joined an acting troupe that traveled across America. Can you imagine traveling in an acting troupe, you know, on horseback across America and ending up in St. Louis in 1820? And when he did that, it was important because he didn't like acting anymore. He was about 17, 18 years old. And he decided that, well, they really need portraits around here. And he actually met Chester Harding, who did our portrait of William Clark down on level 1, and who was the great portrait painter really for America at that particular time. But he would leave the East and come to St. Louis and other cities in the summers and paint all of the dignitaries and important people. And but this ambitious young man, just like Bingham, when he was a young man, just sort of just studied at his feet and thought, well, I can do some of this. And he did. So the next plate. This is the first engraving printed west of the Mississippi. And it's of Daniel Boone. It's after Chester Harding. It's a stipple engraving by James Otto Lewis. And if he had done nothing else, that would have been such a claim to fame. It's one of the absolute hardest things to find. You know, there are only 2 copies three copies. One's in Fort Worth, and 2 are in St. Louis. And one of them probably was one that was here that we helped seed one of the younger institutions with when they were all beginning to get started. Oh, here, you can have this. Not ever thinking about me 150 years later. But anyway, it's a wonderful frontier, just latent, symbolism from this piece. Harding had done a portrait, and then Lewis elaborated on the frontier look in this piece. Well, he stayed here for, I think, exactly 1 year. And so that makes him our St. Louis artist. And and then we find him next in Detroit. And he studied the papers and said they need miniature portraitures here, and they need, I'll do what I learned from Harding in St. Louis back here. And so he decided that, Tecumseh's brother, the Shawnee Prophet, as he was called, that actually probably as significant as Tecumseh in terms of Indian resistance, what came back from exile in Canada at this time. And Lewis painted his portrait. And so that was significant in its way, because it got the attention of the governor of Michigan, Lewis Cass, our Cass Avenue, that's the same Cass. And he actually was just about to become the Secretary of War for the federal government. And he wanted to go on peacemaking trips, council trips, treaty trips around the Great Lakes to all of the tribes that lived there. We're talking about thousands of tribal people that were still independent and still very warlike and very angry with the government. And but Cass was a very strong figure in his day and wanted to do that, but he also wanted to do portraits and to have a record of these leaders and regular tribal people as well. So he saw this portrait of the Shawnee Prophet, and Lewis came to his attention. So he took him with him to all 4 of these trips that he did, these peacemaking trips. And he would gather the portraits up and then send them to another associate who is the superintendent of Indian Affairs, Thomas McKinney. I've already mentioned him with this other folio. And so Lewis had a great in at that point to be able to do this. This was a significant way in which he could further his career. Send the next slide, Brittany. For a book called Sketches of a Tour of the Lakes, which Thomas McKinney wrote, these uncredited Lewis pictures studded the entire book. It's another first. Up to its time, it's the most elaborate travel account in early America that was illustrated. So these plates went from the council scenes to engraving into Thomas McKinney's hands. And Lewis was excited. He was being patted on the back, and I'm really building my career, and I'm going to work with Cass and Kenny and start to really make my way. But hardly anything was said about the artist in these mysterious pictures. And they're in their own way, they look quiet, and of course I'm colorful in a small book. The copy that we have came from this time, and we were so I'm so thrilled that we have it in the collection to document what was being done in this period. But so what happened at this point gets a little bit kind of ugly. The McKinney said, I'm going to do an Indian gallery, and I'm going to make this book, which is here. But this is the 1820s, and it took about a decade to get off the ground. Jackson hated him, and so he fired him, and so he lost all federal funding, and for at least that full decade. And Lewis, who was making most of the basic sketches for all of these tribal people, was sitting there drumming his fingers on a desk, and then, when am I ever going to do this? I've got it. I'll do my own gallery, and rivalry. And so by the time that he thought that up, McKinney was just starting to send out a prospectus to raise money. And he said, well, I'm going to do this. It will cost $120 for 3 volumes and 120 plates. And Lewis said, well, I'll do 80 plates for a quarter, you know, and so it becomes like a price war at the gasoline station between these two great books. And it's significant because both books were at such a time, they became the two plans, the two works were the most elaborate illustrated books in America up to that time. Alexander Wilson had done his Birds of America and inspired Audubon, but there were a fraction of plates in it. And so these were extremely ambitious pieces. And because Lewis had really the groundwork with the sketches and his own paintings, he actually had the end to get this done first. And so he started to work on them, and simultaneously he quietly started to build, thinking way ahead of what normally is done on creating a quarto edition. Let's look at the next slides, Brittany. I want you to see what he was. So this is plate 1 of, and this is our new acquisition of the quarto of this plate of the Sully or Renata at this time. And so what I noticed when we acquired this spring was that the plates are somewhat different, and which is in terms of coloring. You can't quite see it on the wall, but when you turn the pages and look at them up close, they really do become different works of art. And here Lewis has got a free open field to do this before the other, but let's look at a couple more. And I think this is a good example. This is, remember this plate. It's very delicate. It's a perfect portrait. And as McKinney came out, he was saying, well, these are just mere sketches. I have trained artists from Philadelphia making my book. Well, essentially, a lot of times they were redoing Lewis's plates because he had collected them through Cass, and they became sort of government property. So it's pretty fast and loose. But as you see, the folio plate and in terms of coloring and the quarto plate are somewhat different. Next one. Further, it's nice to be able to see them together. So the left are plates that have come directly out of this book and preserved here for many years. The rights are a springtime acquisition from the resale. Next one, Brittany. And take a look sometimes at expressions on the faces too, while we're looking at some of these in this basic group. Next. This is the one I showed you. It's bigger because it's not really bigger. So that's confusing. The quarto is much smaller than this, but look at the difference in terms of it. But also look at the eyes. You know, somebody once said that Lewis had sort of the artistic drive of Picasso, with sort of faces and angles and people's eyes and ears and facial expressions going all over the page all at once. So it's sort of like, and I thought, well, that's not exactly right, you know, but many times when somebody starts to say something about one artist, everybody, you know, gloms onto it and becomes rather tragic. I find these very, very delicate portraits. Next one. And again, think of Lewis at the time when he was doing these sketches and paintings. He was actually staging Native Americans for the very first time out literally in the Great Lakes woods at great councils and campfires where Sacs and Foxes and Lakota and Chippewa and all the tribes were vying with each other. Some were allies, some were bitter enemies, but they were meeting this great governor, war chief Cass, and then fascinated that their portraits were being taken. Some of the Native Americans were then sort of sent on tours to Philadelphia and Boston, and other artists did, it is true, redo some of these portraits, but not all, but hardly any of that. Was just very fractional. It was usually because they didn't have some prototype from Lewis at their hand that he had sort of sent in good faith while he was waiting to actually contribute to the book. Next one. This is Black Hawk. And we'll look at that in a moment too, in another version. Next one. This is Keokuk. Now, I want you to, so what happened about this time was as we get to this point, McKinney did get his gallery funded, and he started to publish at the time that Lewis was about 2/3 of the way through his book. And all of a sudden the bottom dropped out because people, the marketing, and I think more importantly, McKinney and Hall put in this big extravagant text in the book. And Lewis kept saying, you know, buy the parts, text is coming, my descriptions will be coming soon after. And they never did for the Aboriginal portfolio, just only prospectus statements. And I think I'm going to give credit to the readers of the 1820s and 30s. They wanted text. It wasn't something necessarily that this particular plate of Keokuk was so much better. I actually think there's more naturalism and grandeur in the Lewis plate. It was just he wasn't describing anything, and people wanted to read about these plates. And, let's look at another one. Again, we looked at Black Hawk and James Otto Lewis, and this is the Black Hawk in McKinney and Hall. And our bust downstairs that Bob Dick did kind of follows along this model, as well as an engraving in Black Hawk's life. But information about Black Hawk and the Sacs and Foxes and the Black Hawk War, that everybody wanted to read about that at this time. And Lewis didn't supply that, but I think he supplied a much more naturalistic and probably more accurate picture of the time for the portrait. Next one. And then now this is the difference is I find the pose way more accurate, you know, probably staged by Lewis to ask the chieftain to do this. But the difference is I don't feel are significant. What do you think?
No, I mean, it's difficult to say which one would look more like him, but if you're gonna flatter a warrior, the one on the Lewis definitely does. The McKinney and Hawley looks just kind of stocky and not very athletic.
It builds into all of the portraiture grandeur of the staging. Right. Next
It
one.
has more of the Chester Harding
Yeah.
in the James Otto Lewis.
And the boom picture. Next one, Brittany. The Indian women, this was a plate that had started in the sketches on the tour to the Great Lakes and then went into the portfolio and into the quarto editions. And we'll look at those in a moment too.
John, I just have one question if I can interject. In the exhibition, the Americana exhibition, you pointed out quite well how McKinney & Hall included images of the women, not just male activities and male leaders. And in doing the reading through with you on James Otto Lewis, it seems like he very early on, like part 4, had a chief's wife included. Part 8 had quite a few women images, including this one. Would it be an overstatement to say that if it weren't for Lewis's work, McKinney & Hall's wouldn't have been so groundbreaking in the inclusion of the female members of the Native people?
I don't think it's an overstatement at all. It's actually another achievement of what he had done. You know, I think that I guess I really like the fact that in the Americana exhibition, I could put all of the 3 volumes together and bring out the plates of the women. It's much more feminine of an Indian gallery than any of the others, except that the work was based on Lewis again.
Right, so it was really thanks to him that
Right.
that happened.
Right. And another one, Brittany. And now this is one of, I've always loved the image on the right. But this was a sketch, you know, of that plate. And this was embellishment that was done back in Philadelphia. And my money on a Native American woman with a papoose on her back in the northern Great Lakes, she would probably look a little bit more like that than sort of this beautiful Madonna of the prairies. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting how these pictures were acculturated too. The next one, great. I want to show you that another aspect of that. You know, our portrait of Wakanchihiraga, a Chippewa chieftain, but from a little bit later than this time. His parents were the ones that Lewis was painting, but this is his sketch. And so when you take sketches and work them into oils in this way, I think that there has something to do, like Lewis didn't get a chance many times to work his paintings into oils. They were snorfed up, you know, and taken into the East to be reworked by other artists. But there's such great similarity even at that stage. And Julie, why don't we look now at some of the quarto images? And so again, his project went bankrupt, and of the portfolio before the 80 plate book could ever be done except in just a few copies, which I desperately like to get my hands on a couple of those. And he actually he did some other significant things and always moving and always being creative. He remembered Peter Rindesbacher in St. Louis, another St. Louis artist, briefly, and he used one of his images. He brought in artists to help him finish the last few plates. He did about half of them, but it just wasn't working. And so by about the same time that this book was being half finished or sort of finished and ruining him at every stage, he decided, well, I need to do a smaller, popularly priced edition and try to supply text to what I was working on. And so that's where the quarto edition came in. He went to London, where the greatest engravers of all were at that time. He worked with the Ackerman Company, which did Kaplan a little bit later, and he started to build the text and the images, which he had plenty of, to do this. These are the plates. These are the prospectuses, and you can see what's so wonderful in these parts that we've got now. We have the really raw, uncolored images to compare as well. And he also supplied, the British didn't put up with this, like, I'm not going to give you text. He made him write, you know, and so that's one of the great achievements of the London edition. Came out in a couple of parts and then went bankrupt. You know, McKinney & Hall was doing Gangbusters, that book, But he still persevered and did, after that, 3 New York editions up until 1853 of the same, that he tried over and over again to get the work out, but it never quite could gel in terms of the public imagination, and then it didn't sell, because by that time, Catlin, Bodmer, McKinney and Hall, all of those books were subsuming his groundbreaking, work in this. I find that very, very poignant, but what we acquired in the resale was for parts of every one of the portal parts that were all put together, possibly, by, maybe this was Lewis's own copy. Maybe he was taking it around and trying to get a 5th edition. It's a very mysterious portal to turn up. The only comparable material on Lewis like this in quarto form is actually gratefully in St. Louis at Washington View. They have a 3-part version of one of the editions. We've got parts of all 4 of the editions. So a scholar on this field could come here and compare the two, and look and see how this was all put together. And I find that really excellent. While we're looking at these illustrations, again, he was criticized because the Native Americans weren't pretty enough, or or handsome or something. And I think of it. He was out there talking to elders who knew Pontiac, and to contemporaries who actually fought with Tecumseh. They were suspicious, angry, heartbroken, defeated, worried, concerned. And one time when I was talking to Reese himself about this mysterious work of art, I said, has it ever occurred to anybody that these Native Americans were starving? And so so when you look at the plates, we'll look at a few more back in color in a moment. I think you make the judgment yourself. It's wonderful to have this text, because what this quarto text does is it explains exactly what he was trying to do in the portfolio. And so, which I find really excellent as well. So many of these Native Americans are emaciated in these pictures. And, they don't reinforce the lie that everything is good now and there's lots of peace and the natives are happy. It doesn't reinforce that at all. And that's kind of what McKinney and Hall, even as superintendent of Indian Affairs, was sort of pushing for, is to try to create a story in their plates about what white Americans really wanted or hoped about the great noble red man. Very romantic, very romantic. Catlin was the worst of all about that, and as magnificent as his plates are, but Lewis was more honest about that. Let's go back to the other. Here I am. There, and the next plate, right? So these are some of the plates in the portfolio, not in the quarto. So take a look at them in terms of those expressions that I mentioned. I feel the more I study Lewis, the more I appreciate him, because his naturalism and his honesty, was pretty much uncompromising. He was determined, and I think I'm borne out in this because if I hadn't had the support of many people in this room, I certainly couldn't have afforded this book, right, Julie? You were there in the sale with me. I just thought, oh no, it's going to go like everything else today, and I never try to be empty-handed. And it's great to see that now in this century, after 200 years of being obscure and a great mystery, this book has always been, that his work is being appreciated by art historians and scholars worldwide. Alyssa Pearson is in the audience, helped recently do a full collation of this book. And there's secrets in the book in terms of how it was read, preserved, studied. And she was able to determine that yes, there is sort of an ideal order that Lewis tried to make. An order of these galleries has its own meaning and its own consequences. But I think we determined that we were one or two off, I believe, in terms of the actual order. What does that mean? What do these faces really say? I think, is that the last one?
A few more.
And isn't it wonderful? We can just keep going through. And isn't it wonderful that they actually existed and were done? And so I mentioned Rindisbacher. This was one of the last plates in the book. So the books petered out so much that he had to go to other artists and other prints that existed at the time. But one that I was very complimentary. And again, he picked up this particular plate, which he redid of one of the last Narragansett tribal people. So there was a great deal about Native American history in the series. Might have, yeah. And this is plate 72 of the 72 part, which we've got. So which is wonderful. We actually have 2 copies of that plate. So magnificent failure or failed magnificent person, I'm not sure. He certainly had it's one of the hallmark treasures of the Mercantile. And now that we reinforced it with what seemed was so natural with these other books, to have the quartos and the folios and the octavos with one of the only known quarto sets, and probably the best one in terms of its variation. I wanted to share that with you today, and I'm excited that it's been such a great audience. So thank you again.
Jackson on the friendship medal,
Yes.
isn't that ironic?
Yeah, right. And in terms of how this was all coming down at the time, right? Yeah.
Just a quick question. So what year do you think he passed through St. Louis?
1820 and 21. And he died in 1853. We know even less about him because of that stupid Smithsonian fire that burned up almost every work of art that we could have learned so much about Native Americans, Catlin's stuff, John McStanley's. Lewis actually had donated about 200 works to the Smithsonian, and then they had that fire in 18. The only good thing about that fire was that it got our founders thinking, we better build the second building, and because the first building was the same model and not fireproof. There was a question.
Yes. It strikes me 2 things, John. One is in viewing how they are attired, dressed, that still today in Africa, we see many communities that continue to dress in what is, I don't know if we consider it their original, but certainly the way that they show themselves. And to see this with the Native Americans, not that I haven't seen it before, but as you're presenting it to us. And I greatly appreciate your commentary on who these communities were at the time they were being painted.
Well, thanks, Suzanne.
It really varies so much so, John, because I think too frequently, people like myself, uneducated, I'll walk through and go, oh my gosh, that's magnificent. But then is it truly magnificent? And we have this lovely collection, but what about these populations of people? Do they also have these paintings in their galleries or
You,
museums?
you brought up a very important point that I should recognize. Lewis and Days and the people who painted the Great Lake tribes especially, they gave people names. And because of that, as much as I treasure these as a rare book librarian and a great art collection, these are treasured 50 times more because you have these portraits with people's, and I don't have a portrait of my great grandfather. I sure wish I did, but they do. And the names and the names are so important that they were transliterated and preserved in this way. So the costume was right on the spot. Lewis was the eyewitness. And that's a magnificent achievement in itself. So anybody else? Well, thank you very much again. And you've got refreshments downstairs. So.
Well, that does jump the gun just a tad, but the next step is adjournment and refreshments. Thank you very much for coming, and please continue to enjoy yourselves.